Magandang hapon, makikinig kayo sa Radyo Kapwa, CKUT 90.3 FM. Where all Filipinos are Filipino enough.
Welcome everyone to Radio Kapwa. My name is Alan, your host, alongside Franz, Veronica, and Laura. Today we'll be talking about our favorite Filipino word. Now for me, I would have to say I have two. Can I do that? Is that cheating? But I have two.
Not at
the
all.
first
Go
one
ahead.
would be kasama, because I kind of started joining Filipino groups in Montreal specifically because I wanted like a more radical perspective to it. So that was my introduction to the community. So I really cherish that word because for those who don't know, kasama means togetherness, companionship, and allyship. And especially the allyship aspect of it, I feel like is really important because we are in Canada and because we need these allies, right? But on a more kind of personal or family note, I would say dinuguan, which is a dish actually. And for those who don't know, it's pork blood stew, and it's like my kind of, at least I see it as my grandma's like most special dish. And yeah, that dish means a lot to me, and it just feels like home every time I have it, you know?
I guess I can start with mine. Also, I forgot about the food, but the food, yes, of course, that's a word. Yeah, of course. For me, it's one word, but as Tagalog speaker, there's just one word can mean different things. So I actually chose the word kaibigan or kaibigan. So sorry, Laura, I got it first.
It's okay.
I think it's just like a very mix of how we speak, right? So the way we pronounce it is different and it would have a different connotation, but the root word of it comes from the same thing, the root word of ibig, which is love. And so I like the word a lot because it kind of shows that, like, regardless, there's a love involved with your relationship. Romantically speaking, kaibigan is like the one you loved. You know, it's not your lover, it's like the one you loved. And then kaibigan is the one you're friends with. So initially I thought the word ka, but actually ka is a word, but it doesn't really showcase much. But then if you connect it to the root words of Tagalog words, it becomes like to be with. It always comes to the togetherness, just like what Alan says. And also, Alan, I also would like to point out that Alan has a book called Kasama. I know you won't say it, but I will say it. So Alan is really inspired with a word that there's also a word that he named it as the title of his book. So that's for me. Kaibigan, kaibigan.
I felt the same exact way. At first I was like, ka? Just ka? Then I was like, no, vegan. Like the same exact thought process. That's why everything that you said, I was like, damn, you were in my mind. Yeah, it was that because of like to love and to be a friend of also. It's love and friendship all around. And my second favorite word, because Alan has a second favorite word, I also thought of kapwa because it all comes together with kaibigan, to love and to be a friend of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was going to be kind of obvious for me too, so maybe I'll bring in other words. But yeah, kapwa was, again, for sure my first thought. That's why we built Sant Kapwa. That's why we're continuing to build Radio Kapwa. Sigaw ng Bayan was a great, great name for a show. But when we say kapwa, we're trying to talk about also this inner sense of togetherness that we feel towards each other, an inner sense of kind of connection. So I think that was like my more obvious answer. I love how our language, yeah, exactly. One word can mean so many different things. I love the word mahal. So the word mahal for me, of course, obviously, why wouldn't I love the word for love in Filipino? Absolutely. But I think in our society, we don't talk about love as an action item so much, where we need to have action behind saying we love people. So what I love about mahal is it also means expensive. It also means costly, right? And to me, that has that other layer of love is costly. Love has value. Exactly. You know, so bringing in that piece of what action or steps are you going to do if you say you mahal me, because this has to have a value behind it. I also just love the way we say happy birthday. I know that's really funny, but I love hearing maligayang kaarawan because the way I hear it, I guess maybe with my code switching brain, is I hear happy day, the sun started shining for you.
Yes.
Happy day that the sun rose for you. That's how I hear happy birthday in our language. So I think that's really, really beautiful. So thank you for sharing all of that, everyone. We are really excited to have John Wayne de la Cruz, who is actually a linguist PhD candidate, and that's why we were bringing in words today. So stay tuned for our interview. Thank you for being here with us at Radyo Kapwa.
This first song of the episode, you know it. He raps in English and 3 different dialects. It's Easy Mills Panalo.
Like they said, though, you can take a man out the hood, but you can't take the hood out of man. Mga kababayan! Turn up! Tayo'y Pilipino, kahit anong kulay ng balat, isa sa puso. Mapatagalog, Bisaya o Ilocano, walang tatalo sa pagsik ng ating tubo. Isigaw ng malakas ang ating panalo. Huwag nang pag-usapan ng mga negatibong pangyayari sa mampanig ka na sa mundo. Kinabukasan na natin to. Yeah. Keep one in your mouth when you're lying and stay on my business or watch you dying. I'm taking my people to heights where you crying, but regular living it, that's what I'm trying to prove. Instead of just lying and booze. First true Filipino rapper on the news. Sit enjoy if you're cool. Haters can snooze while I put my city on the map. 22 double O, Longo City, no cap. Never forgetting the street where my cousin would sit when we always just listen to rap. Kendrick, M and ASAP with some metal and mammy, we turn up with that. Been mundane till the sun came, now we want fame like a kid in a trap. Hey, I've been in Spain, but the letter S is silent. I'm claiming my reign like a king so I can water crops for surviving. Go away if you trippin'. Had a homie, he was crippin'. Ain't got no love for the people who talk over songs when they claiming they listen. These bars never done. 3 stars in the sun. Hey, blue, red, Drake down on the flag. No, we never fear none. Most of us didn't grow up with a trust fund. Know that I'm willing to kill for a loved one. I'm on the move from nothing to someone, reminding my people to shout. Bisaya o Ilocano, walang tatalo sa pagsik ng ating tubo. Isigaw ng malakas ang ating panalo. Huwag nang pag-usapan ng mga negatibong pangyayari sa mampanig ka na sa mundo. Kinabukasan na natin to. Hey, kung inakala mong isang lingwahe lang kaya gamitin ni Easy, may laka mapapala kung ganyan ka mag-isip kay bathala ka sisingil utang na galing sa loob na lumutang, hinain sa turon na may pusang sinaing sa Ilocano, okay. Uray mo nga ipagkakinyayo ti o kinayo di tuyak lang nagururay no sinuti ang tayo tatlo isang sangitam aking tiwagas mo nga payong at tahal kaya itong nga patayang gakan nato'y bayong. Si kayo nga ang amin, lahat kayo, all of you. Ever since bata ako, I've been kinda discriminated in my own home country. Sure, some will be like, oh, puti-puti mo, tisoy. I ain't tisoy, I'm Pinoy. And I swear that nobody will ever look at me the same way again. I'll make it to the top while I'm showing their saves. And nanalo na ako na mula ko na pinugutan sila po sa baktan. Lahat na nasaktan na nalaman nila na pinatay ang kanilang bayani sa kalagatan ng bansa ng pag-aari ng Pilipino. Despite any turmoil, I'll be proud of my soil. Bakit? Kasi tayo'y Pilipino, kahit anong kulay ng balat, isa sa puso. Mapatagalog, Bisaya o Ilocano, walang tatalo sa pagsik ng ating tubo. Isigaw ng malakas ang ating panalo. Huwag nang pag-usapan ng mga negatibong pangyayari sa mampanig ka na sa mundo. Kinabukasan na natin to.
Up next, we have John Marvin with news from the Philippines. But first, World Gone Crazy by Han Han and Ala Una. Hope you enjoy.
last days. Her mind's always tripping on another obsession, another game.
Buksan ang isipan at imulat ang mata. Tingnan ang iyong paligid at ano ang nakikita. Humarap sa salamin, sa sarili ay aminin. Hindi ka lang ginawa, ikaw din ay manggagawa. Bata-bata, paano ka ginawa? Bata-bata, paano ka ginawa? Lumaki sa kahirapan, buong buhay lumalaban. Kailangan niyang malaman, dagdagan ng karunungan. Tuklasin ang daan tungo sa kaligayahan. Di ka lang pinanganak para lang ikay maghirap. Alamin ang totoo para sa sarili mo. Ikaw ay nandirito, kailangan ng mundo. Bata-bata, paano ka ginawa? Bata-bata, paano ka ginawa? Bata-bata, paano ka ginawa? Bata-bata, ano ang iyong ginagawa?
She gon' say this world has gone crazy. This world's gone crazy if she don't stay.
Uy, ayaw kalimti ug ayaw ilibot sa tanang katawhan. Ibutsyag mo gayud. Nga ang imong naibawan di lang pansit og adobo. Unta imong maamgutin sa ka ug ako. Ikaw baka ha si dunya konsolasyon. Asawa sa Kastila nga mapag-aron ingnon. Nakitan mo na ba si Sisa nga naghilak? No one and sa buot sa pagpangita siyang anak. Hain naman ang mga Maria Clara, ang mga Elias ug Crisostomo Ibarra. Liwat kas mga praile, baka kun nga nabida ug daugon si Basilio tagon nga Pilibustero. Kini ang akong awag kaninyo mga igsoon. Unsain yung batiyon o ginyong paminawon. Nganong ang kabataan kinahanglan ng bahinon. Na ay tagon nga FOB, na ay tagon nga bacon. Siga ang mata o huna-huna. Ikaw ako kitang tanan kay usara. Usa ang gigikanan, usa ang dugo. Gimugna sa abo nga usa ka Pilipino. Dili mo natuhuan ang ilang mga bakak. Kini inyong anak, bisayang magbabalak. Bata-bata, paano ka ginawa? Bata-bata, ano ang iyong ginagawa?
Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Marvin Reyes. I am a youth leader and a community organizer here bringing you important news back home in the Philippines. The article is from Rappler with the title, Filipino cartoonist Tarantadong Kalbo wins International Award for Tumindig. Filipino artist Kevin Eric Raimundo, who is behind the popular Tarantadong Kalbo comics, has won Japan's prestigious Good Design Award. The Japan Institute of Design Promotion announced this year's winners on Friday, October 7. Raimundo was among 31 international winners from 392 awarded works from outside Japan. He was recognized for Tarantadong Kalbo, the viral Fist People artwork that showcases the response of dissenters and activists against the atrocities during the Duterte administration. The iconic comic showed the lines of gray fist bowing down but only one glowing fist literally taking a stand. Comiket that Tarantadong Kalbo's publisher and Raimundo himself also shared the win on Facebook. It is artwork created to encourage voters to register to vote for the national elections. Creators called the participation by creating derivative works from his artwork. The proceeds from merchandise sales were used for various support activities, such as donating to the Artists' Labor Union, Comiket wrote. They also praised the viral artwork for starting a movement, encouraging and inspiring many Filipinos to take a stand for truth, honesty, and justice by creating their own tumindig versions. The artwork, which was released in July 2021, was also a call for Filipino voters to register for the 2022 national elections. The Good Design Awards organization began accepting entries since April 1st and screened a total of 5,715 entries from around the world, with just 1,560 of those awarded. According to the Japan Institute Design Promotion, the award ceremony is a platform for design evaluation and advocacy. It acknowledges exemplary design in many spheres, with the potential to drive industrial growth and enrich lives. The article is written on October 8, 2022. Thank you so much for listening. Maraming salamat sa pakikinig. Once again, this is John Marvin Reyes delivering you Philippine news from abroad.
Welcome back, everyone. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Fran Stoner on the ones and twos, Radyo Kapwa, CKUT 90.3 FM. As usual, I am joined by the magical Laura Kaluya, who makes sure we sound smooth and sexy for you on the air. And, you know, I had to slip in a little Tita joke there, right? Right?
Oh, no.
I'm becoming that awkward tita and I will own it. We also have here co-hosting with us Veronica Jane Bertiz and Alan Matudio, who I refuse to call a guest co-host because everyone's a host. It's cool. We want everyone here. We're super excited to be interviewing John Wayne de la Cruz today. Hi, John.
Hi, everybody. Magandang hapon.
We are so happy to have you here, a Filipino linguist. We're going to figure out what that means to be a linguist. So just to start, John, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your little elevator pitch about you.
Sure, let's see if I'll be able to sell myself. Hi, everyone. My name is John. My full first name, I should say, is John Wayne de la Cruz, but I've been so used to just calling myself John because my family moved to Edmonton, Alberta, like 12 years ago, and Anglophones are not very used to compound names. So for a while, I've just been going with John, but yeah, I'm John Wayne de la Cruz. I was born and raised in the Philippines. Specifically, I'm from Tarlac, but now when people ask me where I'm from, it's complicated. If I'm responding to someone here in Quebec, I tell them I'm from Alberta. But if I'm in Alberta, I tell them I'm from the Philippines. But if I'm in anywhere else, I tell them I'm from Montreal. So there's all the little layers of belonging.
Yeah, sounds like diaspora baby issues we all share, right?
100%. Yeah, I mean, at first it was a little bit confusing, but now it's cool. It's cool to belong to a lot of different places and a lot of different cultures and identities. So
exactly. And I think we talk about this a lot on our show where it's like, what's this like fragmenting and fractioning, right? Like, because Desiree's not here today, but myself and Desiree are raising mixed race children. And it's like, what is this half? Like, no, they are 100% Filipino and 100% everything else of their other culture and 100% Quebecois and 100% Canadian. And even if that math doesn't add up to some people, it adds up for us and it celebrates like the beauty and the like multi-dimensional pieces of our identity, right? And I'm sure that can relate a lot to what you do as a linguist. But yeah, for folks who are not really familiar, can you please tell us a little bit about the field of linguistics?
Sure. Yeah. And I totally 100% agree. Yeah. So I'm a PhD candidate in applied linguistics at McGill University. I did want to specify that I'm an applied linguist because I focus primarily on the application of linguistic theory into second language education. So my work has to do with language teaching and learning, whereas there are some experimental and theoretical linguists who focus mostly on linguistic science, I guess. There's a little bit of a divide in the field about who's a linguist and who's not a linguist and what linguists really do. But we might be familiar with notions of linguists studying languages, documenting how they work, studying syntax, grammar, things like that, the sounds, sound inventory, things like that. But my work primarily deals with things that have to do with education, I guess, to put it simply. So my earlier work had to do with looking at the linguistic practices of multilingual students and documenting what they do with their languages during English learning, because I'm also an ESL teacher. But now I'm trying to branch out and look at plurilingual practices of immigrant learners, particularly Filipino immigrants, and how, I will say because I'm a Filipino immigrant, how our plurilingual practices and identities get influenced by language policies here in Canada, which, depending on where you are, they can be monolingual or bilingual, but regardless, they don't necessarily align with the multilingualism of many immigrants who come into Canada and learn the official languages. So I want to look at that tension.
That's awesome that you shared that, because like coming into this myself, I'm not really familiar with what you guys exactly do. And you touched upon that. But would you be able to share a bit about what exactly where you're at in your research, or just discoveries or your experiences? Because like that's a lot for me, at least, who's not familiar. It's a lot of big words that I like. Imagine explaining it to someone who has no idea.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to take a little moment to out Alan for a second. Sorry, Alan. Because right before you came on, John, Alan was like, oh, wait, isn't John the person who bought one of my graphic novels? I didn't realize he was a linguist. And now I'm feeling self-conscious. So I just wanted to throw that out there to hear any comments you have to share, because Alan was like, oh my goodness, what's a linguist? They bought my book. What are they going to say about my book? So yeah, please share your thoughts.
No, 100%. Well, I mean, part of my research has to do with plurilingualism, right? Well, that's kind of like my main theoretical framework. So plurilingualism, in simpler terms, just really refers to the idea that languages and cultures are inseparable. And all of the languages that we know, whether they're English, French, Tagalog, I know Ilocano and Kapampangan from my parents, all of these languages are part of my repertoire, as well as the cultural knowledge that come with these languages. And this repertoire is made up of languages that are not always at the same level of competence. I think we're so used to thinking of ourselves as, oh, I'm multilingual or bilingual because I'm equally good at French and English. At least that's kind of like the popular discourse in Canada. Whereas the reality is no one's always 100% good at all of the languages they know. And that's the norm all over the world. And that's the norm growing up in the Philippines. And so that's what interested me in this kind of framework. And that's also why I wanted to buy your book, Alan, because I saw the Baybayin and I was like, that's very cool. That's plurilingual. It was English, French, and Baybayin. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to spend my coins on that book. But in terms of where I'm at with my research, so I just actually completed my candidacy, so I haven't started collecting data yet. That said, I've mostly just done my literature review, and basically, as funny as it sounds, there's nothing much about Filipinos in general in the literature. Sure, of course, there's going to be little research here and there involving Tagalog speakers, but plurilingualism is pretty new research-wise. Like maybe it started sometime in the 90s, late 90s. And even then, a lot of the things that we do in second language teaching today still is very monolingual. We still compare students to native speakers, particularly in how they sound, especially when you deal with immigrants who don't look white, to put it plainly. That said, there's a lot of emerging research now about how Canada's bilingual framework and Quebec's French-only framework, that these policies, even though they don't particularly talk about education, teachers and learners do inform their language ideologies or the way they live their lives through language. They do inform that based on the discourses promoted by these policies. So there's a lot of immigrants from different parts of the world who come into Montreal, for example, who might describe themselves as, oh yeah, I switch languages all the time, or speak a different language than French or English at home. But if you ask them how they identify, immigrants, particularly in the one research that I was a part of, we found that, say, immigrants from China would identify as not plurilingual. They would identify mostly as monolingual. And part of the reason why we thought they did that was because here in Quebec, we promote like a French only kind of profile where these immigrants, they don't speak French, or I mean, maybe they don't see themselves as competent in French, and then they're still also learning English. And so their home languages are kind of put to the side, and that kind of multilingual identity is also shelved. Whereas we found that a lot of people who were born and raised in Quebec or Montreal in particular, particularly Canadian participants in that study, they didn't have any problems identifying as bilingual or even plurilingual because they already speak the dominant languages in the society. So yeah, I don't know.
You said something so interesting to me, because I think when I heard the term plurilingual, for me, it was just like, okay, it's the same as multilingual and we can kind of use that interchangeably. But what I'm hearing from you is plurilingual does not just associate to the actual language, it also associates to the culture. And I love that distinction, and because I do think it's important, because while maybe sometimes our native mother tongue's accents might take over or things like that, as diaspora, we are still Québécois. We are still Canadian, even if we are speaking English or French with a little Filipino accent, that doesn't mean that we do not speak that language, right? And I think that you made a really great point when it comes to immigrants and accents, right? Like if it's Eurocentric accents, it's like so sexy and beautiful, right? But if it's not Eurocentric, it's like, oh my goodness, these immigrants don't know how to talk. And we often associate a non-Eurocentric accent with less intelligence, when it's really not that. It's actually more intelligence because we're juggling so many languages. So there's a question that kind of popped into my head as you were talking. I would love to hear your ideas or anything you have to share with regards to code switching. Because for me, when I use the term code switching, it's not just from, okay, I can totally switch from English to French depending on what space I'm in. It's also kind of this societal way, this cultural way of taking up space, right? Am I taking up space by highlighting more of my Filipino self? Am I taking up space by highlighting more of my Filipina Quebecois self? So yeah, I'd just love to hear your ideas on code switching, which is just something like a lot of immigrants don't realize they do and they have a skill for, right? But don't really talk about.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. It's so cool that you're asking me about code switching because it's part of what I do as well. But yeah, just to go back a little bit to what you said about the difference between multilingualism and plurilingualism, and that's very much it. A lot of traditional discourse or conversation surrounding multilingualism lists languages like they're separate codes, as you said. That's why we code switch, because languages are just separate codes. You list them, maybe you rank them depending on how competent you are across your languages. But plurilingualism doesn't put them on a list and instead puts them in a circle, I guess, like Venn diagrams, kind of circles where they overlap a little bit, and whatnot. And code switching was kind of born out of this because in the past, linguists thought that only people who are multilinguals are able to code switch. But they totally forgot that even among monolinguals, like if you're a francophone from Quebec who only knows French, you would probably know Quebecois French, maybe Joual as well, and maybe standard French or standardized French. I hate the word standard because, of course, power. It's there's a lot of power tension there. But even then, even say Anglophones who are English monolinguals, they would know a lot of other things too about different accents from all over America and things like that. But when it comes to code switching, as you said, I think we don't really value it as immigrants learning official languages because it's not valued at schools, right? What valued at schools is speaking English only or French only. And so when you code switch, there are some instances, documented instances, where students are punished either directly or indirectly for code switching, either by getting less points for something like oral exams or getting kicked out of an immersion program. I remember I did this French immersion program in Trois-Rivières, where you get red cards every time you switch to English, and when you accumulate 3, you're out of the program. And it was like a government program.
That's crazy.
So yeah, but I think definitely when it comes to accent too, and the words we use, and whatnot, and, like code switching can be a very noticeable marker for when people also want to emphasize certain aspects of their identity, because identity is multiple. So, and we code switch depending on a lot of things, depending on context. As you said, it's a very smart linguistic move. Right now we're speaking in English because we're talking in English, but if my mom calls me 2 seconds after this, I'll probably talk to her in Tagalog, right? And this might not be conscious of a choice, but it is still an intelligent, implicit choice, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I realized that with this interview, I realized how much I did care about language and how the way some of my, sorry, I'm bringing it back to my book, but like as I'm hearing you speak, I'm just like, how important it was for me to use certain words to represent different Filipinos, because I like to share that there's more than, like, again, we're not a monolith, and different words and these expressions. Like, for example, we use some parts of the Philippines, we say an organ to represent a swear, and that's very region specific. I'd like to like switch things up and maybe just talk about your insight attending graduate school as a Filipino. Like, what's your experience like? Do you have many Filipino peers? Do you feel, how's the vibe?
Oh, the vibe. I mean, it's probably not going to be surprising to know that academia in general is still very much, traditional. And by traditional, I mean white, maybe older. I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit young for most people who go to grad school, particularly people who do PhDs. And I don't have a traditional background for it, in the sense that most of my peers, they would have some sort of relative or even parents who are academics. And I have no idea what that's like, right? But everyone's like, oh yeah, my mom did this. And I'm like, well, good for you, you and your mom. But I feel like it's growing, like we're getting in there. It's slowly but surely. And of course, not to blame our own Filipino immigrant culture, but I feel like it was so easy for a lot of Filipino immigrants to come to Canada, earn money, money that's so much more than what we would have earned back home. That why go to school, right? Like, why spend so much more money for something that might or might not pay off? But that said, I've heard that in the cohort that the new cohort in my program, for example, educational studies, language acquisition, I think there are 2 Filipinos there, whereas in my cohort from 2 years ago, there was just me. And also in education in general, it tends to be women-centered, which is, I'm not saying it as if it's a bad thing, but it's interesting to see that, we see still traditional gender roles kind of reflected in who we think of as teachers, or say, I know I'm going to bring up nurses because it's one of the more stereotypical examples. But I mean, in terms of the vibe, I think it also depends on your department. I think I'm lucky because I guess at McGill, my department has that social justice aspect to it as part of their mission vision. So I was able to find professors that I really clicked with in terms of the kind of work that I want to do. And I was able to make sure that my supervisory committee are all immigrants, professors who all come from different parts of the world too, who would understand what I say, because it's so difficult in academia to explain why you matter, why your questions matter. Like if I tell people like, oh, I'm investigating how Filipinos plurilingualism is, being influenced by language policies, they're like, well, why? Why are you doing that? Why are you asking that question? Why does it matter if it's being changed by policies? Like for some people, it's not high stakes, but for me it is, right? Because I saw myself get changed through my process of being here. But yeah, so sometimes it's hard to justify why you matter.
All right. Thank you so much for really just sharing your experiences and the work that you do trying to disrupt the academia when it comes to learning about who we are, because it's not just about the language and what it associates with us. So to close it up, we ask our guests, and in what ways have you been told you weren't Filipino enough? And after that, it's like a teeny tiny minutes of like, what does kapwa mean to you as a linguistic?
Oh, that's very interesting. I don't know if I guess, yes, it's definitely happened. Particularly when I started paying more attention to how I sound and my accent and things like that, people had started telling me, oh, wow, you sound like you were born here. As if there was something wrong about being born elsewhere. And, as a linguist, an aspect of, say, even English language that's not often talked about is the fact that there are world Englishes. That Filipino English is in its own right a variety of English that has its own grammar and accent and vocabulary. So that's one thing that comes to my mind. But of course, even with my own family, the fact that for my own family, I'm too white. For my white peers, I'm never going to be white enough, if that makes sense. So I feel like we all know that struggle. Yeah, and the other question was about
what does kapwa mean to you?
That's funny because I've been thinking about that because of the little notebooks that I got from the night market. And it's a really good word because I don't think it translates directly. I mean, there's like fellow or fellowship in English, but I feel like with kapwa it's a very egalitarian or collective aspect to the word where, this is not just your peer, this is not just someone you work with, this is someone who is also you. I don't know if that makes sense. And that's kind of like how we do it in the Philippines, right? Like your neighbor is your family, is your friend, is your tita. We all titas are everywhere. You don't know anyone and they're your cousin. I feel like that's kind of like what I like about the word kapwa, where it's almost like you're looking at yourself in the mirror, but you see a different person, but that person is who you are too. So
thank you so much for John, Wayne, Nicolas de la Cruz, PhD candidate in McGill, for really, just broadening it and letting us into what you do and the important work that you do for our community, the important work of you disrupting the academic community as well. And for that, we really want to say thank you for having your time doing an interview with us at Radyo Kapwa.
Thank you all for inviting me.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for being with us today, John Wayne, and for talking about plurilingualism. I'm really excited to see what will come next in the research on plurilingualism and how it affects us in our day-to-day as a society and how we communicate with each other. We would for sure love you back again next time. So this next song is called Porque by Maldita, and it's in Chabacano, which is a Spanish-based Creole spoken in the Philippines. We hope you enjoy this one.
Tulala lang sa aking kwarto at nagmumuni-muni ang tanong tiempo, el mal y hace derecho. Nadie me eso, tapi Dio era olvida yo contigo. Ang lahat ay binigay ko, ngayon ay sising-sisi. Sobra-sobra ang parusa, di alam kung kaya pa. Bakit sa iyo pa nagkagusto? Parang mula ika'y naglaho. Porque contigo yo ya escogí, ahora mi corazón te sufrí. Bien simple lang yo te pedí, era sin ti tú el cosa yo ya sentí. Te pedí milagro, vino el tiempo, el mal y hace derecho. Nadie me eso, te pedí era olvida yo contigo. Huwag nang lumapit o tumawag pa, at baka masampalan kita. Di babalikan, magsisi ka man, ako ay lisanin. Porque contigo yo ya escogí, ahora mi corazón te sufrí. Bien simple lang yo te pedí, era sin ti tú el cosa yo ya sentí. Bakit ikaw pa ang napili? Ngayon ang puso ko'y suwi. Kay simple lang ng aking hiling, na madama mo rin ang pait at bighati. Sana'y magmilagro, babalik ko, mali ba'y diretsyo? Pinagdarasal ko sa aking puso, na mabura na sa isip ko.
La chera chera, la chera chera, la chera chera chera, la chera la chera chera, la chera chera, la chera chera chera, la chera la chera. Mama, kamusta na di na? Tayo laging nagkikita, miss na kita sobra. Lagi na lang kami ang nauuna, di ba pwedeng ikaw muna, akin ang pangamba. Dahil ikaw ang aking mata, sa tuwing mundo'y nag-iibang dahilan ng aking paghinga. Kaya huwag mag-alala, ipikit ang iyong mata na pahinga muna ako nang bahala. Labis pa sa labis ang iyong nagawa, mama. Pahinga muna, ako na. La tara tara, la tara tara, la tara tara tara, la tara la tara, la tara tara, la tara tara, la tara tara tara, la tara la tara.
Papa, naaalala mo pa ba? Nung ako'y bata pa, di ba? Aking puso yung hinanda sa mga bagay na buhay ang may dala. Dala ko ang iyong bawat payo, at hanggang sa dulo, magkalayo man tayo, ako'y tatayo, pangako tatay ko. Dahil ikaw ang aking paa, sa tuwig na ako'y gagapang ng dahilan ng aking paghinga.
Kaya huwag mag-alala, ipikit ang iyong mata, Dana. Pahinga muna, ako nang bahala. Labis pa sa labis ang iyong nagawa, Papa. Pahinga muna, ako na. La tara tara, la tara tara, la tara tara tara, la tara la tara, la tara tara, la tara tara, la tara tara tara, la tara la tara. Yeah. Di ko na sasayangin pa mga natitirang paghinga. Tutungo na kung saan naroon ang mahalaga. Whoa. At kahit na kailan pa may di mawawala, pagkat dala kong mapa, saan man mapunta lang kung saan nagmula. Whoa.
Huwag mag-alala, ipikit ang iyong mata, Dana. Pahinga muna, ako na.
Huwag mag-alala, ipikit ang iyong mata, Dana. Pahinga muna, ako nang bahala. Labis pa sa labis ang iyong nagawa, mapa. Pahinga muna, ako na. La tara tara, la tara tara, la tara tara tara, la tara la tara, la tara tara, la tara tara, la tara tara tara, la tara la tara. Pahinga muna, ako na.
Thank you for sticking with us on CKUT 90.3 FM. That last song that you just heard was SB19's Mapa, and it never fails to make me emotional. I just see myself like telling my parents, my mom specifically, you don't have to work so hard. It's okay. Let me take care of you now. Anyway, this upcoming song is a song suggested by Chuang, aka Lil Waterboy from Baha'i Collective, and it's called Silver Skies by Manila Gray. We hope you enjoy this last song of the episode.
You stay on the west side when the sun stay high, and you stay high. I'm out on the next flight, I'll be back late night. I owe you some time.
Feel like you falling, falling, falling. Let it slowly hit you. I feel it too. When the money hits you, you got the moves. Let the flames kiss you. Wanna see you lost in it all. Then we go flex on them all the packs go straight to the wall. All the ice don't matter, all the flights don't matter. All the nights I wonder in my new whip, new drip, new money coming in, everything but you. Got new rings, new links, new man coming up with everything on you.
You stay on the west side where the sun stay high, and you stay high. I'm out on the next flight, I'll be back late night. I owe you some time. You stay on the west side where the sun stay high, and you stay high. I'm out on the next flight, I'll be back late night. I owe you some time.
You know I got new whips, new drip, new money coming in, everything but you. You know I got new rings, new links, new men coming up with everything on you.
High beams hard in the drop top. You never been with a small talk. You never been with a real one. You just wanna feel something. Roll me one, let's get lost. I'm being honest, feeling your aura strong. When you on that strong, we could be something. Look at that fire, eyes with desire. Baby girl, taking me back to the blue. Reflections of me on my chains and my rings. None that shine brighter than you. You stay on the west side where the sun stay high, and you stay high. I'm out on the next flight, I'll be back late night. I owe you some time. You stay on the west side where the sun stay high, and you stay high. I'm out on the next flight, I'll be back late night. I owe you some time.
Look at that fire, eyes with desire. Baby girl, back to the blue. Reflections of me on my chains and my rings. None that shine brighter than, none that shine brighter. Feel like we falling, falling, falling. Endlessly now, you hold me down. Like you my G, whether we high, we falling, falling, falling. When you pull a late night or pull up too, gotta be a long night, so all of you. When the liquor hits, I taste it off your lips. I'm thinking about the next
You
time.
stay on the west side where the sun stay high, and you stay high. I'm out on the next flight, I'll be back late night. I owe you some time. You stay on the west side where the sun stay high, and you stay high. I'm out on the next flight, I'll be back late night. I owe you some time.
Thank you so much to everyone for joining us on this episode of Radyo Kapwa on CKUT 90.3 FM. We have, as we do weekly, reached the end of the episode in which we have our community announcements. And it is basically the same as it was last week. And it starts off with Rico Love at the Diving Bell on October 22nd. So you don't want to miss that. I don't want to miss that. We don't want to miss that. Go find a way to get your tickets to see Rico Love as soon as they announce them. And that's at the Diving Bell in the evening on October 22nd. So go do that. Up next, we have Anak Publishing, who will be releasing the work of our beloved and talented kapwa, Andy Vicente, this current month of October. Bitter Melanin is now available for pre-order on their website at anakpublishing.ca. That's spelled as ANAKPUBLISHING.ca. Up next, we got QPIRG McGill Alternative Library would love to invite you to a free virtual presentation on October 27th by the Archives, one of the largest LGBTQ2S+ archives in the world, and the only archive in Canada with a mandate to collect at a national level. This event introduces the public to the history of the organization and its place in Canada's LGBTQ2S+ history. Check out at Alternative Library on Instagram. That's spelled as ALTERNATIVELIBRARIES on Instagram. Up next, we have Kabangka, who will be hosting their 5th edition of Pinoys on Parliament in person this time. So you're going to want to save the dates, and that is February 24, 25, and 26. For more information, follow Pinoys on Parliament on Instagram. That's spelled as PinoysOnParliament. And last but not least, the McGill Filipino Student Association is currently recruiting to fill multiple positions on their executive team. Join and help spread Pinoy pride to the community. Check out their Instagram at Mufasa McGill. That's spelled as MUFASAMCGILL. Thank you as always for joining us at CKUT 90.3 FM, and we'll catch you next week. Mabuhay!
Liberation for one is liberation for us all. Tuloy ang laban!
Yay! That was so good.
That was so great.